Our plenary speaker and special guest to open this symposium is Dr. Arati Prabhakar, and it is my honor now to formally introduce her. And after I introduce her, I will ask her to come forward, and I understand that if time permits, you'll be willing to entertain a few questions. So we'll kind of leave that up in the air depending on how the session goes. So without further ado, let me introduce our very special guest this evening. Dr. Arati Prabhakar is the current director of DARPA. By my count, she's the 21st director, and those who know her can attest to her outstanding engineering and technical credentials and experience in the aerospace industry as an industry executive. To me, she has spent her relatively short and inspiring career advancing technology initiatives in support of both national security and private sector interests. These include efforts from early research and development all the way through production and deployment. She assumed her current position on 30 July 2012 and must now believe, after this short time in her job, that there is merit in the DoD's motto, wait, there is a harder way. Her impressive career is marked by first. She was the first female director of NIST. She was the first woman to graduate with a PhD in applied physics from Caltech. She was the founding director of DARPA's Microelectronics Technology Office, and there's more I could go on. Not often does anyone have the opportunity to advance from being a program manager in a world-leading research agency to become, in that same organization, the leading chief executive. But that's her story. Dr. Prabhakar, energy, courage, and I use this phrase purposefully, leadership excellence and eloquence, wisdom, and public service are an inspiration to us all. In fact, her career epitomizes the true values of the SPIE DSS conference. Dr. Prabhakar is an IEEE member and fellow. She has been named as a Texas Tech Distinguished Engineer and a Distinguished Graduate of Caltech. She serves on several boards and is a member of the U.S. National Academy of Science, Technical, and Economic Policy Board. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a warm welcome for Dr. Prabhakar. Dr. Prabhakar.
Thank you so much, Ken and David, for the chance to be here. And Ken, thank you so much for what a warm introduction. That was really sweet. Thank you. Now I got to try to live up to all of that. Let's see. I want to start by finding out, if I can see through the bright lights, who's worked with DARPA out of this group before? Oh, I see quite a lot of hands. That's fantastic. That's really terrific. We can't succeed without all of you, and that's why it's a particular pleasure for me to have this chance to be with you today. Many of you know, because you've been involved with us, about the specific projects and programs. Many of you are driving some of them. What I wanted to do today is to give you a little bit of a bigger picture about DARPA, and in particular to talk with you today about how we're pursuing our long-standing mission in the context of the world we live in today. And with that, I'd like to as well tell you about several of our programs to try to show you the future that we are in the process of building with your help. So let's start at the very beginning. I think many of you know that DARPA began in 1958, and the stimulus for the establishment of what was then ARPA, the Advanced Research Projects Agency, was the launch by the Soviets of Sputnik. And at that time, our nation understood, as we still understand today, that technology is a fundamental cornerstone of our national security. And in 1958, we were very clear that we did not want to experience the kind of technological surprise that Sputnik represented. That was not something we enjoyed. We didn't want to do that anymore. And since that time, for the last 55 years, DARPA has helped prevent technological surprise by creating some surprises of our own. And if you think today about the role that UAVs and stealth technology play, if you think about how our soldiers today own the night because of IR sensing and night vision, if you think about the role of communications and networking and precision guidance and navigation capabilities, think about that set of capabilities together, and I think you start to see how these advanced technologies have changed the face of war for the current generation that we're in, and changed the face of war in a way that ultimately changes outcomes and has made us the premier military capability around the world today. That's what we've done for the last generation, and the we that it took to do that was, of course, a vast number of people and different organizations. It took many people across DoD and the military services, the science and technology community, but the acquisition community as well. Ultimately, and most importantly, our warfighters taking these technologies and turning them into real military capabilities. It certainly took our universities, our research communities, our small companies and large companies to build these technologies and capabilities. So what was DARPA's role in all of that? Well, for each of these technologies, DARPA had one critical role, and that was to make the pivotal early investments that showed the world what was possible. And in doing that, in showing that we could take big steps forward in capability, our role was to start to light the spark that led to each of these big fires. And that's a heritage we're really proud of. But in fact, the most interesting part of this chart is the blank space on the right-hand side, because that's our privilege and our responsibility to make the investments today that lead to those kinds of breakthrough capabilities for the next generation. So how are we going to do that? Well, the place it starts is the place we always start, which is with our mission. It has been and will be to prevent and to create technological surprise. We pursue that mission by going after three objectives, and I think these are, none of this is news at DARPA. This is how we've thought about our job for many, many decades. I like to think of it in these three components. The first is to demonstrate breakthroughs in capabilities for national security. So here I'm thinking about systems capabilities, integrated capabilities that really change what's possible for national security. Along with that is a critical foundation in new technologies and a robust technology base in our country, because without number two, you can't have number one. That link is a really vital and an important one. Those first two objectives are what we deliver to the outside world. To do that, we need to keep our own organization and our way of working with the broader technical community. That has to remain healthy and vibrant as well. So these are the three objectives that we think about. Now, this isn't news at DARPA. This is a 55-year story. It's a story that I hope will go on for another many, many decades. What, of course, has changed in all of those years and continues to change is the world in which we're operating. The geopolitical situation continues to change. The technological environment in which we're living changes. Sometimes we help drive those changes, but it also means that we need to continue to think about how we're going to perform our mission. So what I'd like to do today is tell you about how we're approaching each of these three objectives in the context of today's realities. So let me start by talking about breakthroughs in national security capabilities. Today's context is one that is very different than the one I experienced when I was at DARPA during my first tour. When I first came to DARPA in 1986 as a program manager, now we realize that it was close to the end of the Cold War, but of course in 1986 it seemed as if that was going to go on forever. And even though the world in which we operated was quite complex, I think a lot of that complexity was masked by the fact that we faced a single monolithic existential threat to our nation. And it was for that Cold War threat that we really focused most of our efforts and our systems and our technologies. Today's world is one in which I think the full complexity is more apparent to us. And that is the term that I think really characterizes the threat environment that we face today and for the foreseeable future. It's a world in which there are many actors who affect our national security, nation states, of course, but also groups and organizations, terrorist organizations, criminal organizations, and even on occasion individuals. And all of these are actors that can put us into positions that we find uncomfortable as a nation and for which we find often that we have limited options. And that's really what we want to deal with. These actors have access to the conventional means of waging war and inflicting damage, but more and more they have access to new kinds of tools, to cyber capabilities, to the tools for the weapons of mass destruction and weapons of mass terror. So it's a very complex mix. Let's see what we're doing here. It's a very complex mix, and it's one that continues to shift shape over time. And that's a primary factor that shapes the national security environment that we're trying to get ready for this next generation. Along with that, ironically, is a future that might also include substantially fewer resources for all of us in the national security enterprise to do our work. And here I'm not talking about the short-term effects of sequestration. They affect us like they affect everyone else. And I'm actually not even speaking here of the budget pressures on the science and technology enterprise. We've been very fortunate at DARPA and throughout defense science and technology to have a very long-term stable commitment over many, many decades to the work that we do. What I'm really talking about is a potential future. I don't know if this will happen, but it's possible that we face a future in which we have substantially fewer dollars, fewer people, fewer resources across the national security enterprise to do the job that needs to be done, simply as a consequence of our shifting economic position in this country, as a consequence of other priorities for social programs and other things that squeeze our budget. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen in the long term, but if our job is to be prepared and to not be surprised by those kinds of strategic shifts, then we need to be thinking today about how we prepare and come up with the solutions that allow us to keep the country safe, even if fewer resources are available to do that job. So, challenging environment for the period that we're in and for the decades that we see ahead. What is DARPA doing about that? And I'll give you several examples of specific programs, but the key themes that we're focusing on today, the first is to continue to focus on developing and demonstrating game-changing capabilities. That's what DARPA's done for 55 years, that's what we're doing today, and that's what we intend to do as long as there is a DARPA. So that's foundational and I think is just core to how we do business. We're adding to that some new ways of thinking about the problem. One is to recognize that this cost driver is going to mandate that we think about adaptability and reconfigurability for our systems at a level that is well beyond what we've done in the past, and we think that radical innovation needs to play an important role here. Along with that, we're thinking about ways that we can start inverting the cost equation in many, many dimensions. And really, we're looking to you for your best ideas about how we can start changing the cost game. I think for many of us in the high-tech enterprise, cost has been someone else's problem. It's a problem that gets dealt with later, and I don't think that's led to very satisfactory results. And in fact, I think it is the innovation in the technology community that will become mandatory for us to really find the creative new lower cost solutions, the solutions that can be implemented for modest costs, but which impose massive cost on our adversaries. And I think there are a number of approaches here. We're just beginning to explore that, and I would really welcome you to join in that conversation. And then finally, even though in many ways DARPA is in the silver bullets business, even we recognize that there is no one system, no one capability, there's not even one single DARPA program that single-handedly is going to transform the face of warfighting for the next generation. That's completely possible. We've done that before and we'll do it again, but the way we think it will happen will be the layering of many different technology vectors together. So while it's hard to imagine any one of our programs doing the job single-handedly, as I show you some of the things we're doing, I hope you'll start to see how they might combine in a way that leads to a much more powerful set of capabilities down the road. So let me try to give you some examples. Let me start with space. There we go. This is a video that shows one of our space programs, a program called Phoenix. This is one aspect of tackling the really painful and difficult challenges of cost for our space needs. Space is such an important domain for communications, for so many of the other capabilities that we need. In the Phoenix program, what we're investigating and working towards is the ability to have a satellite at GEO which is able to harvest and repurpose the valuable assets that are still residing on dead satellites at that very difficult regime at GEO. This is an artist's conception of our satellite, our tender satellite, that has found a dead satellite. It sees this very valuable aperture that is sitting on there that's still completely usable, but it's decided now to go over and harvest this aperture. It's got the robotics capability to grapple with this complex structure that is dead and is not able to cooperate in this action, but it's able to seize it, and over time you'll see that it's actually going to come along and hack that aperture off, in combination then with small satellites that are sent up to GEO at a lower cost. We think that kind of capability would allow us to assemble, sort of build your own GeoSat in a way that could dramatically reduce cost over time. Now, of course, when you start messing with satellites in GEO, life gets interesting. We've chosen to make sure that we do this program in a way that's completely open, completely connected to the international community. We've been very active in engaging the international community because we think it's important to develop these new ways of operating in space, and we want to lead in doing that, but we also want to participate with our partners around the world over time as this develops. So just one aspect of, we hope, beginning to change the cost parameters for space in a way that makes it a continued vital part of our capabilities going forward. Very different dimension is what's going on today in cyber. This is an area that, like others, is not one where DARPA is in the operational realm. Today, cyber operations are scrambling to keep up with the threat that we face from many actors around the world. And what DARPA is really aiming to do is to find a completely different trajectory for the kinds of cyber capabilities that we need to develop. Today, most of our actions are patch and pray. We see a vulnerability because someone attacks it, we patch it, and then we simply have to wait until the next time something is attacked. That's how most of our commercial systems work. It's how the vast majority of our systems work today. It's a very manual enterprise. It's not one that can keep up with the pace of the threat and the rate at which it's evolving. We see a future where cybersecurity is something that never goes away as a problem, but is manageable the way that physical security is for so much of our lives. And we think that'll be possible through a series of technology investments that we're making that over time develop automated capabilities, automated ways to get ahead of the threats, to understand what we have in our COTS-based systems today and in legacy systems, but also over time we start to build the ability to have fundamental security by design in our embedded systems and over time in our networks more broadly. And that is the focus of our cybersecurity programs. As we establish this new capability for a different trajectory in cybersecurity, we also want to start turning cyber into a tool, a capability that we can use in a military context. And that is the focus of some of our research work to establish a foundation for cyber offense capabilities. Here, what we want to do is develop the capabilities that will allow cyber effects to be fully integrated with the kinetic fight. In the same way that electronic warfare today is just part and parcel of how we undertake a tactical operation. We think cyber can be that. It's not today, it's something that sits off on the side and someone else worries about it. But if we give our military commanders the ability to understand networks, to plan missions, to assess collateral damage, and then when an action has been taken, to be able to assess battle damage and understand what's actually been done, with those kinds of tools and capabilities, we think we can start making cyber not just a threat that we're reacting to, but actually a capability that becomes part of our arsenal. And I think that'll be a very different future and a very powerful one for cyber. Let me talk a little bit about what's happening in imaging I was amazed to see when I came back to DARPA last summer after many years working on commercial technologies, the big steps forward that we're taking in imaging. And let me share a couple of examples. This is an example of taking some beautiful single photon detection capabilities and turning them into a very long-range 3D imaging capability. HALO is the name of our program. It's the high-altitude LiDAR ops experiment. And as you can see, it allows us to take images, 3D images, over a very vast area. If you can see the image that's inset sort of in the center, we're able to see details like the pathway along that mountainside that weren't visible previously. We're able to do that in part because of the very high resolution that's possible with this technology. And this is a capability that we've provided to our warfighters in Afghanistan. And as you can imagine, they've been able to use it to develop a much deeper understanding of the landscape in which they're operating today. Another area that where this community, of course, has made huge contributions as well has been in night vision and in advancing our ownership of the electromagnetic spectrum and giving our warfighters the ability to see and to image and to see the landscape around them in a spectrum that no one else, that the adversary is not yet able to perceive. This video, which should be playing, if you look carefully, you'll see in the three quadrants, the upper left, I'm sorry, is showing you the fusion of three images. If you look at the three separate images, you'll find that in each of them you can see some of the action that's going on. You can see the bad guy in the bush. You might be able to see the individual in the car with or without the window rolled up. When we fuse what's capable from those three different bands, all of a sudden we get a level of insight into this scene that is really unparalleled, and I think this gives you a little bit of a sense of what's going to be possible in the next leap forward in multispectral imaging. Let me shift to another area, which is position, navigation, and timing. This is another area where some of the capabilities that we've developed over the last generation, in particular our global positioning system and the pervasive use of GPS. It's pervasive in my life. I get frustrated when I'm GPS denied in a garage. You may have that experience, but of course for our military operators, position, navigation, and timing information is oxygen for them, and when they don't have access to GPS, upon which we've become so reliant, it has much more catastrophic consequences. So we're working today to develop a suite of position and navigation and timing technologies that will allow us to replace our dependence on GPS with much more robust capabilities on our people and on our platforms. This is just one example of using a resonator gyroscope capability, taking a very expensive, exquisite, high-performance technology, miniaturizing it, and through microfabrication technologies, making it in a way that while it doesn't have the performance of the original, it still has far more performance than what's flying in our munitions today. It's also at a much smaller form factor, the form factor of a seed rather than the form factor of an apple. And that's one example of how we can start changing what's possible with position, navigation, and timing technologies today. Let me shift to another area that I think is going to become an increasing part of warfighting, which is robotics. And this is an area where DARPA has done a lot of work over the years. Let me just show you a few videos of some of the interesting things that are happening today. This is our LS3 robotic mule, if you like, which is designed to help alleviate the load for our soldiers and Marines. You can see that it's a robotic capability that is very, very capable across terrain, able to keep up with what this individual is able to walk through. It's also an autonomous capability. The robot here is following the individual in front of him across this terrain. It always seems so implausible that it can get up out of the mud that way, so I love that part. So that's a little glimpse of one aspect of robotics capability, and I think that push into autonomy is actually going to open up some very interesting new capabilities over time. It's also fun just to see how far you can push the technology. And this is an example of a robot that, before it crashes, actually runs faster than Usain Bolt. Don't you feel sorry for him in the end? Just to finish this topic for the moment, today DARPA's engaged in another robotics challenge. This one is addressing the challenges that we face, especially in humanitarian aid or disaster relief scenarios, where we often have situations where a human-designed environment, be it a Fukushima type of reactor, or be it buildings or other infrastructure, these become places where we need to get a capability to function, to turn valves, to deal with the disaster that has occurred, but where we really don't want to send human beings. And so in this new challenge, we're looking for robotics capabilities where robots can walk, climb stairs, turn knobs, and add a level of sophistication in their functioning that really allows them to operate in a human-designed environment. I think that's going to open up, again, a new set of opportunities ahead. So those are some examples of some of the things that we're doing that I think are going to have quite an impact in the coming years and decades on national security systems capability. Let me shift and talk a little bit about our second objective, which has to do with this technology base that lives beneath the systems, but which is critical to enabling our future systems capabilities. And let's start with what's happening in the world today. Something that I think is true today, but has been true for many decades, is this tight link between defense needs, our broad technology base, and commercial drivers for technology. I grew up working with a lot of people across the semiconductor industry. That's the one that I know best, and the pattern that I've seen there is one that I'm sure you'll recognize from the things you've been involved with as well. The pattern that we've lived with for many, many decades often is one in which national security needs drive early investments. For example, a lot of the early investments between miniaturization of electronics, even some of the early work that led originally to the integrated circuit in 1958, were driven by defense needs. As those technologies start becoming possible because of the early defense investments, people also see huge commercial applications in many cases, and certainly that was the case in the semiconductor industry. Many companies, large and small, startups, but also established companies, rushed in and started building commercial products based on that technology that was newly emerging. Now, that was fantastic for national security because that industry today, the semiconductor industry, is about $300 billion a year worldwide. That means that many, many billions of dollars each year get invested by this commercially driven industry to keep driving it forward. That's what's made Moore's Law possible. And we in the national security sector have aided and abetted, but we have also lived off of that massive investment that the commercial sector is making. And that's really why we're able to have the kind of advanced electronics that we have in our systems today. But that commercial driver is a double-edged sword because, of course, in that same period of time, that technology has completely globalized. And in fact, many of the components that we now are critically reliant on for our military systems, not only are they not unique to the United States, but in some cases they're not even fabricated anymore in the United States at all. So that globalization, which is part and parcel of the commercial driver, is something that we also have to worry about. And so that, I think, is the other edge of the sword. So today, out of that $300 billion industry, the Defense Department is less than 1% of the market. But for us, it's something that we're still critically reliant on. So we need to understand that wide globalization of many, many technologies. It affects how we do business. So that's number one. Number two is that, actually I've got them flipped on my slide, I apologize. But I guess I've touched on both of them. It's both the wide globalization as well as this tight link to the commercial sector. So what are we doing about all of that? First and foremost, we need, for our national security needs, we need to ensure that we are still the best user of globally available technology, so that even when we're building with the same building blocks that everyone else is, we're still able to construct highly differentiated systems that no one else can construct. And that's one theme in our investments. At the same time, we recognize that across our research base in the United States in particular, we see tremendous opportunities for the next generation of technologies, be it new electronics or information technology or material science, or increasingly new technologies that derive from the biological sciences. And these two are important opportunities. We go into them knowing that most of those capabilities over time will globalize, but also recognizing that that advantage that we get, even for a few years, can be a very significant one in terms of our national security capabilities. So let me give you some examples of some of the things that we're doing in this area. This is a program that allows us to combine the best available, globally available technologies for digital silicon, but add to that some of the specialized components, be they optoelectronics components, power components, specialized compound semiconductor elements or MEMS elements, and to combine these technologies with enough intimacy that we really are able to get the best of both worlds. And we've done that with a series of demonstrations of core capabilities, but we also want to make sure that we develop an industrial capability so that this is something that our military systems can take advantage of more broadly. And that's what the DAHI program is focused on. In the information technology realm, one of the consequences of the enormous success of the information revolution, of course, has been now that we create vast quantities of data. In the commercial world, there's a huge push afoot to mine big data, usually in the form of text or online media, sort of traditional online media. In the national security realm, we are starting to see, I think we're just seeing the very beginning of a very vast opportunity to develop deep insights of various types out of a very wide and heterogeneous set of data that are available. One of our early programs in this area has been Nexus 7. It's a program that we've worked on the ground with our warfighters in Afghanistan. And by looking across a lot of data that were collected for other purposes, we're able to see patterns of life, and we're able to see the effects in the local region of the kinds of decisions our commanders are making. And I think we're able to give them a window that they're finding very, very valuable. We think that's really just the first step. X-Data is our new big data program that we think will develop over time. We aim to develop a set of tools and techniques and communities that know how to use big data techniques across these very diverse types of data. And I think this is going to be, I think, a very exciting and promising new chapter in a long information technology story at DARPA. Shifting to some of the things that are possible out of the biological sciences, one of the areas where people have had a vision and a dream for many, many years now is the notion of using cellular biology to produce the materials that we want for, either because they provide, starting at the top, specialty chemicals or advanced fuels, pharmaceuticals. And there are many instances where people have done this. It's a fairly laborious process today, but even so, people have had a vision about how we might harness the capabilities of synthetic biology to produce a whole new set of new kinds of materials, polymers or catalysts, functional materials, and over time, perhaps even more sophisticated material systems. It's a very exciting dream. It's one that's limited by the fact that today, the cost and the time to do that kind of cellular engineering is oppressive. And there are companies like DuPont who have made significant investments to pursue these approaches for specific specialty chemicals. They've invested vast sums of money, and it's been worth it because they ended up with products that have been important for their portfolio. But it's really not yet a capability that allows for the kind of wide exploration of the material space that we think is possible over time. So the focus of our Living Foundries program is to dramatically reduce the time and cost that's needed for those kinds of engineering efforts and to expand the complexity of what's possible as well. And as we start down this path, again, a fairly new program, but even the very early results show the promise of really being able to realize this vast cornucopia of new materials, some just materials that we know how to build today, but this will be a better way to do it. But even more interesting, I think, the possibility of inventing and creating materials that we've never known how to build before. So I think this is going to be another one of the exciting areas ahead. The last one I want to show you in the technology category is some of the work that we're doing on brain function. Much of our work in understanding the brain was stimulated over the last few years by the concerns that we had about our wounded warriors. One dimension of that was watching our wounded veterans returning from Iraq and Afghanistan and struggling with the prosthetics that were available to them. Jeff Ling, who was program manager in Defense Sciences Office and is now deputy director for that office, had been an Army doctor and had seen the struggles firsthand. He came to DARPA intent on creating prosthetics capability that would take function to a very different level. Over time, his program developed a quite sophisticated prosthetic robotic arm, but he also worked with his researchers on understanding how the brain controls those kinds of functions. After a lot of research work, recently, some of the first few human trials were undertaken. The video I'm going to show you is a woman named Jan. She's been a quadriplegic for a number of years. She volunteered to participate in this study in which she had some implants placed on her brain, and what you'll see is what she's able to do with the prosthetic arm after a little bit of time.
5 months after the surgery, we came back to see whether she would be able to control the robotic arm with nothing but her thoughts. They plugged her brain into the computer, and this is what we saw.
I can move it up and straight down and left and right and diagonally. I can close it and open it, and I can go forward and back.
That is just the most astounding thing I've ever seen. Can we shake hands?
Sure.
No, really.
Yeah.
Like, come right over here?
Yes, you come over there.
Okay.
Let me grasp your hand there. There we go.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And I can do a fist bump if you'd like.
That's amazing. What are you doing, Jan? What's going on in your mind as you're moving this arm around? What are you thinking?
Okay, the best way to explain it is raise your arm.
Uh-huh.
Go. Now,
Right.
what did you think about when you did that?
Well, not very much. I do it all the time.
Exactly, it's automatic.
Is that hard work? Are you having to concentrate?
No, it was hard work getting there. I struggled greatly to go up and down at the beginning. Now up and down is so easy, I don't even think about it. Side to side, don't even think about it.
Just like
That.
your arms used to.
Yes.
So I think when you listen to Jan talk about how natural it is to control this and to do these complex things with this arm, to me it opens a window into a future set of possibilities for how our brains interact with the outside world. And I think that this is going to be another very exciting area. Let me just finish by touching on my third topic, which is how we keep DARPA a robust and vibrant place. We have any former program managers out here? I know David Whelan is. Any other DARPA program managers? Hooray, fantastic. I hope we also have some future DARPA program managers here, because our business model is completely dependent on finding stellar people from industry, from universities, from other parts of government, bringing them to DARPA for typically 3 to 5 years, and having them invent and then drive programs by working with the broader technical community. Both of those things are important. The soul of our organization is our program managers, but the way they succeed is by engaging with all of you. And so we, all of those interactions really are central to us doing what we do. If all of that works, it allows us to continue to build the unique culture at DARPA, which will always focus on taking the big steps forward, doing the work that leads to huge impact, being willing to tolerate the risks that go along with that, and enjoying and relishing the privilege of public service. And if we do our job and you work with us towards our end objectives, all of us are going to get to be part of doing something that I think we will all be very, very proud of, because before us is the opportunity to create a whole new generation of technologies for national security that over time will give our future leaders the options that they need, really powerful options for whatever comes down the pike. So I'm really pleased to have the chance to talk with you today about that, and I look forward to your questions and comments. Thanks.
So Arthi's graciously agreed to take some questions, and so let me encourage you to take some to come to the microphones. I think there's some in each aisle, and please don't be shy. And while you're getting to the microphones, I'll tee up a couple of questions, but please don't.
David's are going to be the hardest, so let me start with his.
Let's see. So I've noticed that the nuclear weapons situation appears to be changing. Proliferation appears poised to accelerate and probably will upset our historical defense strategies. Do you see DARPA playing a role to help counter or disrupt this trend and maybe help get that back in a very controlled evolution?
Yeah, that is a threat that I think we would all like to see get back in the box, and it doesn't feel like it's there today. I think it's going the opposite direction for nuclear, but potentially for other WMD kinds of threats. DARPA has played some role in these areas, but this is, many other agencies are involved in this. Counter WMD is an area where today we're trying to take a fresh look and to see if there are DARPA-class opportunities for
New
impact.
sensing technologies and things like that.
And I think this is a great example of an area where I think it's very unlikely that we're going to find some new magic sensor that tells you the answer. But I think that by layering technologies together, you can imagine putting a complete capability together that perhaps could be better than where we are today.
Or making the scalability more affordable.
That would be a game changer right there, right?
Very nice, very good.
Right.
Okay, I think we have someone standing, so please, first question.
Thank you. Can you hear me? I guess you can.
Yes.
I can hear you.
Good. One of your comments was about going beyond GPS, and in particular, there's going to be technology for indoor location, an area where commercial technologies really advanced. Is there something there that DARPA is working with, and what is your strategy for indoor location positioning?
I know from my venture life that there's a lot of innovation going on with some commercial drivers behind it for the indoor environment. Most of our focus in our PNT programs is thinking about the environments that our military will have to operate in. Usually what we worry about is environments where we don't have access to the Wi-Fi system that's in the building, for example, which is often something that you can do in the commercial sector. So we are interested in using signals of opportunity for fix, and we're interested in operating in all kinds of denied environments, including underwater, for example. So there may be places where there is an alignment of interest, but ideally we would leverage whatever's happening with the commercial investments and then move beyond that.
So I think we have another audience question.
Yes, hello. I'm just curious about your philosophy towards transition of all this great technology that we've seen DARPA develop. How do we get that into the hands of the squads and the soldiers in the field?
Yeah, absolutely. A great question. So I want to start by saying that inherent in our mission is a huge challenge for transition, because if we're doing our job, we're coming up with technology concepts that break the way we do business today. And so, it's almost built in. And so it's something that I think anyone who's in the R&D business struggles with that. Perhaps we struggle even more. That said, I would say that over the last few years, we've had a really terrific set of adoptions because in many cases, because we've been able to take our technologies to the warfighter, directly to the warfighter. I mentioned HALO, where we're providing this wide range, large area imaging capability. There's other work that we're doing to extend UAV flight time with fuel cell technology that's being used today on the ground. Other instances, for example, our blast gauge, which is a great low-cost gauge that's being worn by over 10,000 of our warfighters today, that allows for a medic that approaches a situation after a blast to understand what kind of stress that soldier's been subject to. So we're seeing a number of these examples where we've started to get the technologies out, and I think that can be part of the answer. Ultimately, it is really a matter of, we spend a lot of time and keep trying to find those partners in the services and the people that will help pull some of these technologies forward. What we want ultimately is those big steps forward in capability, but we know from history that sometimes it's a long period of pushing before we really get there, and I think that's probably what the future is going to look like as well.
Thank you.
Let me amplify on that
Yeah,
question.
please.
So when in wartime, the theater commanders are the ones that are sort of provide the pull.
Yeah.
And they're more risk tolerant. They really understand their needs. And so we do see an acceleration of new technology in times of warfare. And we've just seen a bunch of new technologies get demonstrated. But now we're headed, hopefully, back into another period of extended peace. And that's always been the hardest time to transition, because the service acquisition providers, jobs like Ken used to have, sometimes they're very resistant to making change, and that culture you talked about and the cost. So how does DARPA and OSD, and who best to maybe drive that? Is this I think my experience was that it wasn't clear that I hate to see DARPA get stuck with the bill. But having said that, I think
That's
you
a
need
big
that
bill
carrot.
usually.
I think you need the carrot and the stick. And so, have you thought about trying to work cooperatively with OSD to help motivate? And I almost want to say, I'll use the word bribe, but I mean it in a good way. The services to come to the table.
Yeah. Well, the bridge has to get built. So I think you put your finger on a really key point, because for really good reasons, this transition of the warfighter path is going away. But when you really our objective is, what we want is when we come to a point in the future where one of these new advanced DARPA capabilities really makes a difference. At that juncture, what we want is we don't want it to then take 10 years for that to be something that can be fielded. So I think sometimes for us in the coming years, it's possible that a successful conclusion of a DARPA program will be that it demonstrates a stage of maturity and has a path for how it would go forward, even if we're not ready in the department to pull the trigger and go into a full acquisition process. So I think we're going to have to get more sophisticated about how we think about that. Yeah. And I think that there is a role for us collectively, not just in S&T, but more broadly, learning how to reduce the cost of prototyping and doing the demonstrations that, again, just get you ready for a formal acquisition process.
And maybe also providing them better affordability, and that may be the final attractor.
If we really can change the cost equation, that's really going to be the difference between the things that get, that are PowerPoint and the things that get built. So that's why it matters.
Let me go to the right side of the room here.
Yeah, okay. I have a question regarding BW agent detection and radiation detection, because after what happened in Boston a few days ago, the TV is talking a lot about our concern for the BW agent detection and nuclear radiation detection. So I want to know if DARPA is covering or going to cover interested in research in the BW and the radiation detection or not.
Yes, as I mentioned a minute ago, I think those kinds of weapons of mass destruction, but also weapons of mass terror, do pose an important threat that I think all of us would like to see significantly better capabilities than we have nationally today, or globally even today. So we're taking a fresh look in that area to see if there are things that we can do Again, I think it's not going to be a single solution, but I think that there may be a way to cobble together a full systems capability that I hope would be significantly more effective than what we're able to accomplish today.
Let me go back to the left side of the room here.
Dr. Prabhakar. Hi, I'm Bob Lieberman from Intelligent Optical Systems. Dr. Prabhakar, the National Academies recently released a report, Optics and Photonics, Essential Technologies for Our Nation. Is DARPA going to set up a photonics technology office?
You know,
Of interest to this audience.
Of interest to this audience. Back in probably 1991, when we started what was then the Microelectronics Technology Office, starting at that point, that the optoelectronics and photonics work was always a very significant component of what we did at that time. It continues to be part of today's Microsystems Technology Office. You know, the real answer to any question like that is, please bring us your great ideas, because that's what determines what the programs look like, and that's what ultimately determines how we organize our offices.
By the way, I'll comment, Arati is the one that stood up the Microelectronics Technology Office, didn't you, back in the
Yes, I
early 90s?
remember it fondly.
Yeah, our own offices are always the favorite ones.
Well, they're all my favorites now, so just to be perfectly clear.
Let's go to the far right. Yes, you in the white shirt.
Hello.
Hi.
I wanted to see if you could comment on your perception of your investment strategy going forward. Assuming you have constrained resources, do you focus on bringing up lots of technologies from a 6.1 level to a 6.4 level, or are you working more on larger investments to pull a few items all the way through to a procurement status?
First of all, you know, we always have constrained resources, so that's always a fact of life, and I think it's actually completely fine because it drives us to set priorities. The answer to your question, I believe, really lies in, as managers and leaders across DARPA, our job is to construct a balanced and diversified portfolio for the agency. And you know, what that means is that out of roughly $2.7 or $2.8 billion in our budget, in a pre-sequestration year, we are balancing, on the one hand, you know, our long-range anti-ship missile prototype work that we hope will move forward into a program of record when it leaves DARPA, and is a very, you know, systems-oriented, fairly mature kind of activity. And all the way on the other end of the spectrum is some of the engineering biology or the brain research kinds of things that I showed you. So it's very much apples and oranges. But at the end of the day, it's a judgment. I do believe it is essential that DARPA have some projects that are pushing the more mature systems capabilities forward to the point that our partners in the services can pick them up, but that at the same time we don't lose the ability to cover some of these nascent but very promising areas of technology. So, you know, we continue to struggle with that balance, and I think we should. But I don't see a dramatic shift from where we are today. I like the way we're balanced currently.
I think it's very powerful that DARPA has the ability to take a technology to very high level of demonstrations, because it really puts, I think, leverage on the services that they can't hold back the future. Someone might come forward and challenge them like DARPA.
We like to push for that future. That's good.
I think we'll take one more question from the audience here. And
Great. Great overview. Thank you. As I watch the defense industry, the photonics industry, they're a bit of a laggard when it comes to using crowd wisdom, open innovation, crowdsourcing. Very pleased to see some of the balloon hunting and other endeavors that DARPA has. Can you comment on the role of open innovation in the future for DARPA and for the mission that you have?
You know, starting with some of the work Hank Chesborough did on open innovation, and now with a lot of the discussion about what's possible through the explosion that's happened on the web in the last decade or so, all of that to me is expanding a theme that has been a DARPA theme for 55 years, which is a recognition that the best way we can think outside the box and reach for big impact is to be driving to connect with the smartest, most interesting people across the technical community, actively reaching out and finding them. So to me, these are just new mechanisms that add to what our program managers do day in and day out to go find people, in different universities and big companies, but also small companies, in companies that know they're in the defense business, but companies that don't know they could be in, or should be in the defense business as well. So I think it's just one more window to a great community. Thank you all.
Let me thank you, Arati, for a great talk. It was wonderful. You're going to open your